Woohoo! Platinum versus AEW Dynamite. The May, man, we're almost at the end of May 27th show. We opened the show with a recap of Double or Nothing. Showed what happened in regards to Cody and Lance Archer, Brian Cage winning the Double or Nothing casino ladder deal and coming out with Taz, Hikaru winning the women's title, and Brody Lee going at it with Jon Moxley. What we're promised tonight on Dynamite is the Inner Circle pep rally, and there's a really great bit in contrast with the thing at the end, which I did not think was nearly as effective, at least from a wrestling fan's perspective. We're going to talk about the difference between wrestling fans / AEW fans and the world at large, and why there really is a totally different outlook on that last segment with Mike Tyson and such. But anyway, we here at the beginning, we get the promise of the Inner Circle pep rally, and then a great bit where they have the Stadium Stampede champion shirts, which I think is really funny. And then, of course, the punchline is they don't just have a few boxes of it, they have a whole truck full of them. Okay, so we go to the open. And again, I really like this open from AEW. A little music, a lot of color, very exciting. And the Battle Royal tonight, the big match is the Battle Royal, and the winner is going to get a TNT shot next week. SCU versus Kip Sabian and Jimmy Havoc with Penelope Ford at ringside is going to happen tonight. And again, I like this. Look, they're laying the card out for us. Brian Cage is going to wrestle, be there with Taz, and Hikaru Shida is going to wrestle. Wonderful. Great. So we open, and AEW Dynamite has done a great job lately of opening with something hot. And in this case, it's Matt Hardy and the Young Bucks. They're doing a little promo here, but Adam Page and Omega leave during the promo. Really awkward. I get that they're going for this thing of like, how close are we still? But them leaving in the promo, it didn't really serve anything. Not that everything always has to be in service of an angle. But again, a lot of the theme, and keep in mind, I'm an AEW fan. I feel like a lot of the things that they've done lately are really good. I thought Double or Nothing was a great overall pay-per-view, and the show has been getting progressively better. This show definitely had awkward and stilted moments, and this was one of them. But Matt Hardy and the Young Bucks come out to wrestle Joey Janela and Private Party. Small things. I like that Joey Janela and Private Party came out with a similar color scheme. Little touch, but I really liked it. The match goes on, and I've said in the past with Private Party, something I don't like is I feel like their stuff is always on the verge of either falling apart when they do spot after spot, and then some kind of domino doesn't fall, and then it seems to throw them completely off, or they're on the verge of an injury happening. Now, the injury that happened at the end, was it a work, was it a shoot, is of less consequence than the fact that when they showed the replays, you could clearly see if there wasn't a real injury, there should have been, and that's problematic to me. Butcher and Blade are there in the audience and have a little dust up, which is really interesting with the Young Bucks. Unexpected. Matt Hardy hitting that moonsault on all three of the other team laying down, I thought was the best spot in the whole thing. This injury happens. My God, they're just injury plagued, and I'm not going to say it's a curse. It's as a result of bad decisions being made. Matt Hardy taking him to the back. This is the only reason I thought it was perhaps not a legitimate injury, was Matt Hardy taking him to the back was a good look. And it also opened us up for the Young Bucks to get jumped by Butcher and Blade. That's when the now crowned FTR, aka the Revival, show up in a truck. Apparently, this is an AEW thing. You show up in your truck. They come out, they beat up Butcher and Blade, have a stare down with the Young Bucks, teasing perhaps something to come. Not a terrible way to debut. Was it Dynamite and fireworks? Not really. But that's enough to get wrestling fans interested, I'm sure. And that brings us to the end of segment number uno. Now we jump into the next thing. After the commercial break, Moxley is to the ring in a real great entrance. My kids even like his video. They're like, like, whose video is this? They were interested. And then it's Moxley, and they're cool with it. Moxley goes to commentate. We see clips of Brian Cage at Double or Nothing, just absolutely decimating the field. And then we have old Lee Johnson, he of AEW Dark fame, and he's got to wrestle Brian Cage. And this is one of these old school dude demolishes other dude bits. And we get a lot of shots of Ali and QT, which is a continuation of the thing they started on AEW Dark, which I also cover. And they went back to this a lot. The drill claw pile driver doesn't come across very smoothly, but that's nitpicky stuff. He wins. Taz talks and cuts a promo directly to Moxley, which Moxley didn't quite know how to sell, right? If he doesn't want to play it off like it's nothing. I thought he handled this part really well, where it's like almost as if he was like, at first he wanted to dismiss it, but you can't dismiss Brian Cage. I thought that was a really good way for Moxley to play it. Small stuff I know, but I love that kind of stuff. And they're going to have a match at Fyter Fest. Boy, I hate that name, but it is what it is. Go to commercial. The rules of being a role model segment happens. I'm just going to roll this into the second segment. Britt Baker. Rule number 3, don't hurt the role model. Again, this is one of those moments that I love the idea in theory, and I love the idea itself of let's get Britt Baker out here. I was thinking about that the other day where people are like, and now so-and-so's just taken out of action. It's like, when Stone Cold wasn't allowed to wrestle, that's when he got the most over, kind of getting his gimmick over. And this is a chance for Britt Baker to do it as well. She's promised that she's going to make a comeback. She sort of says some things like, Chris Statlander, you're not an alien, you're full of shit. Sheeta, you're a fraud. Nyla Rose, part of this conspiracy. Again, it's one of these things where it's cool that they're giving her a thing, but again, you write things 3 times. 1 time to get the ideas down, 2nd time to perfect them and hone them and edit them, and then the 3rd time to make it sound like you just came up with it. And this shows signs of only going through 1 draft. Again, they need somebody there with sort of a writing background that can help them edit and shape this stuff. That's just my opinion. And this is a case where you could get something really great. In fact, I thought Britt Baker calling out Aubrey Edwards, the referee, was kind of a nice moment. But again, this whole thing just really came across as at a time where, let's be honest, they can ill afford Okay. Cool. So we are about to move on. Yes, we're going to go to a commercial break. And after that commercial break, we come back with the Inner Circle with Orange Cassidy wanders into their promo. This is one of those moments that I really like. It's one of these ideas that probably popped up, and it completely worked. Orange Cassidy comes in seemingly oblivious, or at least not caring about the fact that it's the Inner Circle, and the Inner Circle sort of vows revenge. You plant the seed, it's something that's going to pay off later, and that will be interesting. Great. It completely works without having to overdo it, and everybody remains in character. I love it. Then we get Christy Janes versus Hikaru Shida. Looks great. The hair pulling spots it's one of these weird things they came up with where one of them would take the other by the hair and sort of dominate for just holding the hair, and then the other would counter. They did it back and forth. It should have completely not worked. It completely worked. In fact, CZW would have been thrilled. They would have been able to build this thing as like hair pulling cat fight action. Oh God, CZW. Oh boy. Anyway, there's an HBO Max commercial in the middle of this, kind of a product placement thing, which I think is really interesting. As AEW, part and parcel to them becoming a bigger promotion and bigger things is the level of advertisers that you have on your show. It's always a great indication of where you're at in modern society. And AEW and TNT are getting bigger and more prominent advertisers on this show. That's one of those things, it's a sign of good health. Kind of like looking at who's watching your show. It's one of the reasons that people always go, oh, well, NXT and AEW, they're neck and neck, but they're not really when it comes to the demographics that are important. That's one of the places where AEW absolutely shines. And as a weird little thing, like the Road to Double or Nothing, which was the hype show, last time for a major pay-per-view for AEW, they had the Road to show come on right after Dynamite, which is what you would normally want. This time it was nowhere near Dynamite, and it still did a decent rating. Like between 300,000 and 400,000 people watched this hype show, independent of any other wrestling show, and the demographics on it were really good. So AEW's got a bunch of stuff going on. I hope they know that. I'm sure they know that, and they got to keep that in mind. This match was good. Hikaru wins with the Falcon Arrow, and we are out, right? Then we get a commercial. I'm going to keep it on this. The split screen. Why? At first I asked during the commercial break, and we got Paige and Omega on a couch, but then they do something inexplicably weird, which is Paige just goes up to the camera and kind of stares into it and messes with the camera, which was really fascinating because it was so odd and still, like, that's, again, I love AEW in that they take chances and they do things. Not all of them work. And some of them really do show a lack of sort of foresight in editing, but sometimes they do something and it just, for me, it works. And Paige staring into that camera for most of that commercial break split screen definitely worked. And I just can't even really tell you why it worked. It just worked. So awesome. And we come back. We got clips from Cody and Archer again. We got Allie distracting QT numerous times during the Cody promo. And Cody gives a great promo. He does a great job. And I know there's people who complain, oh, he books himself to go over and win this title and la, 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 la. But again, I think we can see he's the right choice. I thought it was great to not have Lance Archer and Jake here. Because then they can bring them back next week with something huge to do. I think that's very smart. Again, it's an advantage that they have, whereas Raw is saddled by this 3 hours, where it feels like they're desperately filling up the space, whereas here, they have a little room to breathe. They can do a debut. They can do a big thing with Tyson. They don't have to hit every single beat, every single show, and I think it really serves to their advantage. And it just completely worked for me. Going into the next bit, we're now at the 1 hour mark. Coming back from commercial, we got Kip Sabian and Jimmy Havoc with Penelope Ford against Kazarian and Scorpio Sky, representing SCU. The really awkward spot in the beginning where Scorpio's to get thrown out of the ring, and he kind of threw himself out of the ring again. It's one of those weird spots that just sort of begins to take me out of things. And I'm hoping they just tighten up on this kind of thing. Mistakes happen. We're talking about guys wrestling at often breakneck speed. I get that. But, man, it really did throw me a lot. Yeah. I love the, oh my God, the Scorpio Sky, the cutter and into the dragon sleeper thing, I think is just one of those spots that just looks really good and really pro. Penelope distracts Kazarian, and Jimmy Havoc and Kip Sabian hit their finisher and win. This really surprised me, and I was really glad to see it, actually. I just feel like, and now, so they're going to get the match against the champs next week, who are Omega and Page. And then the winner of that will go on to face the number one contenders, who are the best friends, I believe, at the next pay-per-view, Fighter Fest. Hate that name. Cool. Now we got the Battle Royal. They introduced a couple of the MJF and Wardlow, and then they went away, and then they came back. So then I was having to figure out who was all in this fucking thing. Really Bush League. Why you just wouldn't have a simple listing of who was in it? Again, assuming that people are diehard fans who are watching this and not potential first-timers, why wouldn't you have a list of who was in this match and a brief thing about who each one of them was? I just thought it looked really Bush League and indie that we're coming back and all of a sudden there's just a bunch of people in the ring. I just didn't, including people that the regular Dynamite crowd, and I assume the people who watch Dynamite are much more numerous than the people who watch AEW Dark. And there was a couple of dramas that were started on AEW Dark, like between the Librarian and Brandon, and none of that stuff. Again, if you're not going to do a series of clip packages or the commentators really help us out with what's going on, none of it makes fucking sense. And we don't really know who Luther is unless you're somebody who watches AEW Dark on the regular and all that kind of stuff. Now, for me, great. I do watch it, and so I do know. But again, I thought it just looked really, really weird to not have a listing of who is who. Okay, we don't have to watch every one of their entrances. I'm not saying that, but my God, let us know who people are. How hard is it to put a picture up of them with a graphic? I just don't. Weird. So Luther's choke slammed out. I'll say this. Boy, Battle Royals, which can tend to be kind of like, they really went out of their way to make these things special, and you could tell. Luther getting choke slammed out was an impressive, great-looking spot. Wardlow throwing Sonny Kiss out is great. MJF going over and stomping Sonny Kiss afterwards, even better. The story you've got in your mind is that Wardlow and MJF, because it's the only story we were given going into this during their promo, which is it's going to end up with just the two of us, and then this tease of Wardlow getting annoyed with MJF when he implied, well, then we know what happens, right? Ha ha ha. Basically, Wardlow's going to throw himself out, and Wardlow's like, what? And he's like, no, I'm just kidding. It's great. That's the only story we got going into this thing, though, right? Billy catches Colt Cabana and ousts him, which is a spot that completely worked. You also realize that Billy Gunn, which by WWF/E standards was considered maybe a slightly above average guy as far as size goes, he is a monster in AEW. Then we go side by side, watch more Battle Royal stuff with the commercial, and then we come back, and Brandon and Librarian toss each other out. And again, if you watch AEW Dark as I do, you realize how funny this is, because the two of them are just desperately trying to get over on each other, but they both keep losing. It's one of those that I hope that they pay off on AEW Dark when these two finally wrestle. They better fucking wrestle. I mean, they spent time on their flagship show as well as AEW Dark setting up this whole deal. Where was Leva Bates, by the way? That always makes me sad when Librarian's there and I don't see Leva Bates. That sucks. Marco threw out Christopher Daniels, like a Hurricane Rana kind of thing. Wardlow throws out Marco. So Wardlow right now is throwing out the most people, which stands to reason. And Luchasaurus and Billy are out as they go at it. That's one of those things, like Luchasaurus is kind of billed as this huge monster that we're setting up for Wardlow. And there he is with Billy Gunn, and they're in the same size category, and they're going at it, and they get dumped by Wardlow and MJF, which is a great spot. MJF, though, is out by Jungle Boy. And now all of a sudden the whole texture takes on, it's a whole different feel. And it's like, what? And then you realize Orange Cassidy's in there. And so Orange Cassidy and Jungle Boy team up and throw Wardlow out. And it's shocking and it's surprising, but in a way that feels very earned. There's Orange Cassidy and there's Jungle Boy. Okay, who's going to win this thing? They have a good little scrap, and then Jungle Boy throws him out. Whoa, so we're going to have Cody against Jungle Boy next week. We're going to have Omega and Page against Havoc and Sabian. And we're going to have Jericho is apparently going to wrestle next week. And at Fyter Fest, John Moxley's going to take on Brian Cage with Taz. Wow. And by the way, Orange Cassidy also suffered at the hands of the Inner Circle. So they brought that around. So now we have the celebration after the commercial break. So this will be the last major segment. I want to kind of give it its own time. Cool. So here we go. Commercial, we got the split. So we see that there's a bunch of cheerleaders there as promised. Vicky Guerrero's there, which again always strikes me as incredibly weird and funny that she's there and doing Inner Circle stuff. But she introduces everybody, and that we're already off and running. It feels really good. Jake Hager, we got Santana, Ortiz, Sammy Guevara, who got the most banged up, so he's there with crutches and such. Chris Jericho. And boy, this is where the segment, oh man, the gifts they gave each other is lame. The poem thing should have worked. I got to be completely honest here. They had lost me at this point, and I was kind of just sticking it out to see what they were going to do with this Tyson thing. And they did it. Jericho, for the gift that he wants Tyson. And then so Tyson comes out with this entourage. Again, it looks so ramshackle. This is just from a stage picture thing. Why doesn't his entourage have a similar look? It just looked really Bush League. They certainly didn't dress up for the event. And then they did their thing and they did the pull apart after the pushing and the awkward Tyson posing thing. You could tell, again, that guys are not in their sharpest mind for this. I'll just be generous and say that. But here's a tale of two things, right? I'll probably put up a picture that I found from TMZ Sports, which is, if you looked at that picture and you looked at the headline of TMZ Sports, you would think that this thing completely worked and it was amazing, right, with Tyson and Jericho. And I guess that's what I wanted to talk about briefly here at the end. It's a tale of two things, right? For wrestling fans, especially WWE fans would have looked at that segment and gone this thing was lame as hell. And AEW fans probably were crushingly disappointed at how sort of ramshackle and how, it did have the feel of spontaneous at a certain point, at the pull apart point maybe, and afterwards. And so that's good. But otherwise, it really just did come across as ham-handed and Bush League, and it just didn't look great. But for the outside world, it'll probably get them the attention that they want of where this is leading. And at least there's some theories and conjectures of what does this mean? And where's this going to go? Are we going to have a match? What's happening with Tyson and blah, blah, blah. So in that way, it completely worked to the outside world. Okay. But God, I just want stuff to be executed better. But we'll see where it goes, right? That's all we can do. All right. Thank you for checking out Platinum versus AEW Dynamite.